Good morning. Good morning. How are y'all today? We're going to start reading Esther 4 today on this beautiful Palm Sunday, the week before Easter. And I praise God for another day, another year to be with Him, to celebrate. And I just thank God for all He's doing. Amen. He is a good God. Yes, He is. Praise the Lord. Okay. I'm going to get started. Inviting some people. I know a lot of people are at church, but this is mainly for the ones that can't get out and go to church either. This will give them an opportunity to study the Word too with others, not just be by themselves. Okay. Esther Chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud bitter cry. Haman made sure that the king did not know what the edict said until it was too late to stop it. Now it seems to be common knowledge even to the Jews themselves. When Mordecai heard of this, he went out in the middle of the street so all could see and rent his clothes and threw ashes upon his head. Oh, Jesus, it did it again. I'm sorry. All right, showing. It keeps showing. Okay. Anything that he had done would have revealed mourning, but this is a very deep type of mourning. He cried out with a loud voice as well, which drew the attention of the people to him. However, he was crying to God as well. Verse 2 of Esther 4, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate with clothes of sackcloth. He had possibly gone all over the town in this manner. He lived in the palace, so he had come back there still mourning. He might have roused the attention of Esther with his cries. No one could come inside the gate in mourning clothes, so he must stay outside the gate. Verse 3, in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, There was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. There was no way to stop this, but by God, they were fasting, praying, and mourning, and God hoped the Lord would see their problem and come to their rescue. Verse 4. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. The chamberlains here were the eunuchs who served Esther. The queen had many maids who helped her. One of the jobs that eunuchs did was to keep Esther in touch with what was happening outside the palace walls. They ran errands for her and did things that her maids could not do. One of them took clothing out to Mordecai for her. Mordecai was so grieved he would not be comforted or take the clothing. Verse 5. Then called Esther for Hatach of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. Esther wanted to hear from Mordecai exactly what this was all about and how this edict was made. Verse 6, so Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. Verse 7, and Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. Mordecai did not know that Haman had tricked the king. Hello, Becky. Thank you for joining me. We're in Esther 4. We just got through reading verse 7. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. Mordecai did not know that Haman had tricked the king into this edict. The king had not written this, Haman had. The mistake the king had made was to let Haman use his signet ring. Verse 8, also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther and declare unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him and to make request before him for her people. This was a big load to put on the head of Esther. If the edict was carried out, she would die the same as all of the other Jews. The king did not know that she was a Jew. Haman did not know that at this point either. Mordecai sent her a copy of the edict so she would know in detail what it said. Mordecai knew that the king loved her, loved Esther. He felt if anyone could sway him to stop the senseless murder of Jews, it would be Esther. Verse 9, and Hatach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Verse 10, again Esther spake unto Hatach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. Verse 11, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. Esther explained to Mordecai that if she went into the king when he did not call for her, he would have the right to kill her. There was one exception to the rule. If the king reached out his scepter to her, she could live and have audience with him. She knew if she went in, it could mean her death. Verse 12, and they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Verse 13, then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. It would make no difference at all that she was the queen. If they killed the rest of the Jews, they would kill her also. Someone would tell the king that she was a Jew, and he would have to kill Esther along with all the rest, because it was the law. Verse 14, for thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time. Then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom of such a time as this? Mordecai was sure that God would stop the murder of the Jews. If Esther did not do what she could, God would do it another way. There had been many people who had given their lives to save their fellow men. This is what Mordecai was asking Esther to do here. If it was the will of God for Esther to do this, and she did not, God might destroy her himself. Mordecai now believed that was why Esther was chosen by the king. He believed that God placed her there to help her people. Verse 15 and 16. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan and fast ye for me, and neither eat or drink 3 days, 3 days, night or day. I also, my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Esther had gathered up all the courage she had. She decided to go ahead and speak to the king, even if it meant her death. She did want them to fast and pray for her safety. She would do the same with her maids. It was almost as if she was saying, I might perish either way. So what do I really have to lose? We're all going to die sometime. The important thing is to make our lives have a purpose. She had realized that the life of all the Jews was worth taking the risk. And verse 17, so Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Excuse me. This was saying he gathered the Jews together and proclaimed the 3-day fast. Many of the Jews realized the seriousness of the edict, and they would have gladly fasted with him to try to get help from God. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go into the next chapter, which is Esther 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. This was a dangerous for Esther, as it was for Daniel to walk into the lion's den. Her life would be taken or spared with the wishes of her king and husband. The 3 days of fasting had taken place. She was assured the Lord was with her. She put on the garments of the queen to go to her king on his royal throne. She did not rush into the throne room unannounced. She waited outside, but in full view of the king. He was seated on his throne, looking toward the very spot in the inner court where she was standing. She was beautiful, and he was full of love for her. We must remember. Esther 5, verse 2. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. When he reached out his scepter to her, it showed that he was not angry with her for coming to him unannounced. She was forgiven for any error on her part in coming. The king knew that Esther was not a selfish woman from past experience. He knew something of real importance was troubling her, or she would not have taken this chance. Her touch of the scepter extended to her was her humbly thanking him for receiving her. Verse 3. And verse 3 Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the house of the king. It was very obvious from this statement that he had great love for Esther, and calling her his queen, he was saying he accepted her as his wife. He respected her. It was obvious he would have to admire her courage as well. This is a type and shadow of the Christian drawing near to the throne of God. He has reached out and invited us to come. It is important that we touch him as well. The king offered her anything she wanted unto the half of the kingdom. It is interesting again that the Christians will be joint heirs with Jesus. He has offered to share with us as well. Verse 4, and Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. We know that was not the real reason she had come. At the point of him offering her half of his kingdom, she could have asked for the life of the Jews. That would have gotten a yes or a no quickly, but Esther was smarter than that. There were many people still praying for her. She had the wisdom of God guiding her every word. It would have been unusual for her to ask the king to come to dinner, but it was extremely unusual for her to ask Haman to come too. Men and women in Persia did not eat together unless it was a private family affair. Haman thought of himself even more highly than before after she made this request for him to come. Verse 5 and 6. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. The king was aware that this banquet was not the request that Esther risked her life for. Again, he repeated that he would give her up to half of the kingdom if that was her desire. We may assume that Esther still did not feel sure of herself in this matter, and that the Lord was leading her in every word she uttered. Verse 7 and verse 8. Then answered Esther and said, My petition, my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for him, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Haman was so enraged at Mordecai's continual refusal to honor him that all the privileges he had been bestowed were as nothing. Selfishness and pride can quickly breed ingratitude, envy, and even murderous hatred, as it did for Haman. Verse 9, Then Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Haman was feeling really proud of himself for being invited to the queen's banquet, twice with the king. He still hated Mordecai. What did Mordecai have to lose? What more could Haman do to him than kill him? Haman was totally unaware that Esther was a Jew. Verse 10, Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent call for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. Verse 11, And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Well, okay. Yes, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself, which he judged was doing him singular honor. And by the joint affection of the king and queen to him, he thought himself established in his dignity and grandeur. Haman had 10 sons, and he was bragging to them, his wife, and friends of his great standing with the king and now with the queen. Verse 13, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Verse 14, then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou and merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. The lesson here is obvious. Whatever you reap, you sow. Hate destroys you regardless of whom you hate. Haman would be destroyed for his great hate of Mordecai and the Jews. That was a short chapter, so let's go on into and read Esther 6. Esther 6, verse 1. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Verse 10, and it was found written that Mordecai had told a big Stana and cherished two of the king's chamberlains, keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king of Ahasuerus. And verse 3, and the king said, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. Verse 4, and the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. God has a sense of humor, as we will see in this next few verses. The intentions of Haman were to hang Mordecai, not to honor him. Haman was a friend of the king and was in the palaces at the time. Verse 5, and the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Verse 6, so Haman came in. And the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Haman was so self-centered that he never once thought that the man the king wanted to honor could be anyone except himself. Verse 7 and 8. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor, that the royal apparel be brought, which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal, which is set upon the head. Haman really went to the extreme, and the blessings he told the king to bestow upon this man, because he believed he was the man himself. He told the king to dress him as the king and put the king's crown upon his head, as if he were king. You can see from this that Haman really wanted to be king himself. Verse 9, and let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array of men whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. Haman was so conceited that he could see himself as king. For him to be led around town by a high official to the government was a height of pride. He was about to fall to the lowest ebb of disgrace. The very man he wanted to hang was to be honored the way he wanted to be honored himself. Verse 10, then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Verse 11, then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor. Haman had no choice in this. He had to do it because the king had commanded him to. This was the most humiliating thing that could possibly happen to him. He gave no reply to the king for fear of being demoted. Verse 12, and Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning and having his head covered. He had no sympathy when Mordecai had been mourning. Now it was his turn. He hung his head in shame and went home. Verse 13, and Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise man and Zeresh, his wife, unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. His wife and his friends could see the hand of God in this. The wise men here are magicians or stargazers. They realized that Haman would not win this battle against the Jews. Mordecai was a friend of the king. If he was a Jew, the king would turn this edict back against Haman. He was doomed. Everyone who he thought would say something good to him have said he would surely fall. And in verse 14, and while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlain and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. This was the second banquet that Haman and the king had been invited to attend by the queen. These chamberlains were working for Esther, and they came for Haman. Esther or the king were not aware of the embarrassment that had befallen Haman. God bless you, and we got 4 more chapters to read in Esther. This is a good story. I mean, I can't get enough of this story, but I mean, I know the ending, I know the beginning, I know the end, but thank God that we're reviewing it today. And God bless all. Until next week, love y'all.